once I got saved, God told me to stop making those designs. So I did. I actually ended up giving everything away, everything that I owned, all the clothing I had. I used to have like a booth, so I gave everything away.
Oh, wow.
Because God told me to do so. It wasn't until about a year and a half later, I started traveling all over the U.S. with an artist, Miles Minnick. I started managing him. And one of the flights back to California, I got an idea to make a hat, which was Pure Thoughts.
Beliefs are the hidden scripts that run our lives. Beliefs lead to thoughts, thoughts lead to actions, action leads to habits, and those habits lead to outcomes. So if we can master our beliefs, we can control our outcome.
Welcome back to Food for Thought. My name is Santiago Castro, your host. And on this episode, we have a special guest named Jorge Batres. He's the founder of an upcoming Christian brand up in LA called Christ-like Collection. They have phenomenal gear, dope hats, definitely recommend them. But on top of that, he's also the manager for this upcoming rapper named Miles Minnick. He's pretty big, not sure if you heard of him. Check him out on TikTok. But Jorge dives into all the areas in his life that he had to go through in order to get to where he is today. His experience with, growing up in Mexico to then moving to America, all the way up to his encounter with Jesus to then, inspire his new brand, and then how he even met Miles and got into the opportunity to travel the world, managing him and really putting him in positions that he's never thought he'd be in, and really just kind of showing his vulnerability alongside that as he guides us through this interview. So as always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend because it really does help, and enjoy this episode. Yeah, man. So tell me a little bit about yourself. So you're from Mexico, right?
Born and raised, yeah.
Okay.
Born and raised in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. Family and I immigrated here when I was 10. And I don't know if you're familiar with Juarez and how it is out there. But
Not really. I mean, I have an idea. I've been to Mexico a couple times.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm from Colombia, so I feel like it's usually the same thing, different side of the world. Usually.
Right. So Juarez is one of those. It's a border city, so it's one of those. It's more on the dangerous side. It's not a tourist spot. Think about TJ, but a little worse than that.
Okay.
So it's a borderline of Texas, and Juarez is there. If you've ever seen like sicarios or warlords or any type of those type of shows, they're usually talking about Juarez. Juarez is at a time was one of the most dangerous cities in the world.
Oh dang, dude!
Like 10 deaths per day.
Oh man.
Usually women.
Oh why? Is there specific? Is just?
I think it was part of that evil culture. What I'm assuming it's almost like an initiation, because a lot of these women used to get kidnapped, raped, killed.
Oh, okay, that makes
and
sense.
I think it became a part of their culture. Like, if you want to be, you want to roll with us, you got to do X, Y, and Z.
That makes sense.
So it got super dangerous around 2005. It was actually the most dangerous city in the world as the war in Iran was going on. We had more deaths in that city than the war did.
Dang.
And so my sister at the time was around, so I was 10, so she was around 13, 14. So one of her friends from high school was kidnapped and killed. So that's what did it for my family. My mom was like, no, it's too close to home.
Yeah.
So we literally left Mexico from one day to another after that happened.
Oh, dang.
Because a couple months before that, my dad's business had gotten raided. So in Mexico, you don't really pay taxes, but you got to pay,
for like safety or whatever, or for protection.
Exactly. So we're already like thinking about coming out here. So from one day to another, bro, my mom said, get a backpack and pack 2 shirts, 2 shorts, and a pair of sandals. And that's all you could bring.
Oh, dang. That's crazy. And when was that? How old were you?
So this was like 05. So I was like 10.
Okay.
And the reason why she told me to pack small is because we lived in the border. So we got like, it sounds funny, we got like a 3-day pass to come to LA. It sounds like a Disney thing.
Yeah, literally, yeah. It sounds like you get the fast pass.
Yeah, we got a 3-day pass to come to the US. I'm sorry. We got a 3-day pass. And so we walked the border legally. But then my uncle was a truck driver. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be saying this.
I mean, maybe not.
So he was a truck driver, so he waited for us in the other side of the border. He was he had a stop in California, so he was like, just come with me. So we got to his truck, and he had the driver's seat. Behind the driver's seat there was like black curtains, and when he opened it, there was like a bunk beds and his fridge and his microwave, because that's where he lived when he was on the road, right?
Yeah.
So me and my family of 5, we all got in that truck and made it to LA.
Nice, dude.
Yeah.
And you've been here ever since?
Mm-hmm.
Man, how was like high school? How was it how did it go from, at least your experience from being in Mexico to then being in the United States? What was your mentality behind it? Because you were 10, so you were enough to like comprehend a little bit what was going on. And what did you expect? And then did those expectations meet or fail?
Can I be vulnerable?
Yeah, for sure, man. 100%.
I haven't talked about this, but so when I came from Mexico, and I was already conscious, like you said, I was 10, so I was old enough to kind of know.
Yeah.
It sucked.
Yeah.
Leaving my family. It sucked. Leaving my friends, my neighborhood, right? Like, used to play soccer in the street with my friends. Like, it was amazing. I had a great childhood in Mexico. So when we came here, we had to start from scratch.
Yeah.
We weren't rich, but we weren't poor. We're like,
middle class. Yeah.
Middle class in Mexico, which is pretty good in Mexico.
Yeah.
And I had a Super Nintendo. I was the only kid on the block that had a Super Nintendo. We would come to LA every summer to go to Disney. Like, kids in Mexico don't do that, right? Yeah. So I was very blessed. So when we came here, we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with 11 people for the first 3 years in the projects in a small city called San Pedro, right next to Long Beach. And I'm talking like we had rats, we had roaches, slimy walls. I remember waking up in the morning and, my mom cooked beans. And you know how if you leave them overnight, they kind of dry up? Like, not the whole beans. What are they called? Like, frijoles revueltos?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
So they dry up if you leave them overnight. So I remember seeing, like, freaking rat prints on the beans.
Oh, no, dude.
You know what I mean? And my mom being like, it's all we had to eat. So just scoop it from wherever the rat prints aren't.
Yeah.
Where the rat prints aren't there. So it sucked, man. Like, financially, I didn't have money to buy clothes and fit in. So this was already 4th, 5th grade. So kids were looking at that already.
Yeah, 100%. Were kids mean?
Oh, yeah.
Some kids can be really mean.
No, they were savage in 4th and 5th grade.
Yeah, they have no filter, dude.
So I didn't have money to buy clothes, so I had to share underwear with my sister, not panties, but socks, right?
Yeah.
So I used to wear her socks to school, and they were pink, and they had, like girl logos and stuff. So I used to get bullied for that. Like, and this was before like the word gay was canceled.
Yeah.
So I used to get called out all the time because of my socks. True. So it was tough. I used to get beat up just because I didn't speak English.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Crazy, just for no reason. And so I had to kind of grow up. But I remember like the first 3 months of being in school, in elementary school, I used to cry in class every day, like just wanting to go back to Mexico. Yeah. Like, that was my heart's desire. Like, I just wanted to get out of here. And, I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel accepted. I didn't feel seen. And I remember, like, 4th grade, like, looking outside the classroom window, because we were in a, multiple-story building in my elementary school. Like, I wanted to jump out, and I was like, it wasn't tall enough. I knew this. I'm like, I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
But at least I want to break a bone so I don't have to come back to the school.
Yeah.
So this was my mindset at 10, 11 years old.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy, man.
I had to get out of there.
How did how did that, so then that was what, elementary school, middle school?
That was elementary.
And then how did it get better, worse, like when you moved into like middle school? Middle school is a weird time in general.
Yeah. Middle school was a little better. Now I'll tell you why. So my parents were so focused and they were going through a divorce in middle school, so they're so focused in them, right? That it gave me an opportunity to go into the dark side.
Yeah. Yeah, right? It's usually how it happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So since I used to be a good kid. I'm a good kid now, but I used to be a bad kid. But what I'm trying to say is I used to be a good kid in elementary school, used to get good grades. Even though it sucked, I was still like on top of my game. And then middle school came and I was still getting good grades, but I wasn't being like, there was no award or I wasn't being like celebrated for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started getting bad grades and there was no consequences for it.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
So like, why even try? Yeah. And then
it's easier to get bad grades. It's easier to be a bad kid. And it's, you know, quote unquote, it was funner. So I started hanging out with the wrong crowd. But then I became, I guess, accepted because middle school I became a skater.
Okay.
So then I had a culture
That's
of
pretty
friends.
cool.
Yeah. But other than that, it started getting a little better socially
Okay.
in middle school. But, you know, I was dealing with a lot of internal problems because of the stuff that was going on at home.
Yeah, for sure. And then by this point, you're already, you know, pretty. But how long did it take you to learn English from when you were here?
I want to say like I was already having conversations within the first 6 months.
Okay. Yeah. Usually kids pick up on it pretty quickly.
But I remember the first sentence that I learned in English.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was elementary school, and I got up like the teacher was talking, and I got up. And my pencil was broken, so I went into the machine, you know, the old school ones, the electric one.
Either the electric or you have to hand.
So it was the electric one at the time. And, you know, in the middle of him talking, I just go and sharpen my pencil. I'm like, and he's just looking at me and he's pissed. There's this white guy. His name was Mr. Hoxie. And he's just red. So he talks to me after class and he's like, you can't do that. Like, you have to ask for permission because you're disturbing the class.
Yeah.
So he's like, you have to say this. May I sharpen my pencil, please? So that was the first sentence I learned.
That's okay. Okay, that's pretty cool.
And what I did is I wrote it like in Spanish, like how it would sound in Spanish. So, you know, May is pronounced M-A-Y, but I wrote it M-E-Y.
Yeah.
So I knew how to, you know, pronounce it.
You just look at your note. That's interesting. That's awesome how you kind of like adapted over time. Looking back on it now, was it like, although it was terrible in the beginning, I know to be ripped away from your hometown and your friends, you know, with what you've got going on now, you know, the business that you built, you know, the new business that you have, which we'll get here and talk about in a little bit, but was it worth it? Do you feel like, oh man, I'm grateful for my parents, you know, having to take me out of that? Like, what was your perspective on that?
Now I'm very grateful for my parents making that move. You know, and all I could think about the first 5 years of being here was I want to go back to Mexico. I want to go back to Mexico.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that they made that sacrifice, you know, even though it felt like it was the dumbest decision at the time because we went from living a good lifestyle financially to now having nothing. And it went from my parents being together to now being divorced.
Yeah.
Like it felt like this was the dumbest decision they could have made. But, you know, fast forward 15 years later, you know, my sister graduated from UCLA. She got her master's from Loyola Marymount.
Oh, wow.
My brother recently graduated from high school. You know, I started my business, met my wife in high school, and we've been married for 4 years, going to 5. Awesome. So most importantly, I feel like I had an encounter with God here that because of my story and the things that I went through, I don't think it would have went down the same way back at home.
True. Yeah. It's crazy you said it too, because for me, somewhat similar. My mom, so we're from Colombia, and my mom, so I don't know my dad, but my mom got pregnant and she was living in Colombia. We had a pretty good life in Colombia, in the sense of like you said, we weren't like rich, we weren't like, you know, poor. It was pretty common to have your own, you know, housemaid, you know, where people would just come in and then just do your laundry, cook for you and all that stuff.
Like a maid?
Yeah, like a maid. So it was pretty common within where we're from, Bogota, which is the actual like capital of
Bogota?
Colombia. Yeah. So it was pretty common over there. So my mom grew up with never having to cook or clean. And then she, like her mom passed away a little bit before I was born. And then when I was born, she made the decision to leave. And she was a well-known and respected professor at a really, you know, elite school.
Your mom was?
Yeah, in Colombia. Yeah, she was like a grammar teacher over there. And she like threw all that away to then come to the United States. And then here, you know, it was just me, her, and then my cousin, and then his parents. And so we all came together. But then, you know, we were living together, but then, you know, there's a lot of drama. So then we would split. And then my mom and I were just kind of on our own. And we were just like, you know, really garage hopping. Like we were living in people's garages or couches, like from time to time, like, And my mom like she had to clean bathrooms during the day. So she was like cleaning bathrooms like at hotels and like, working at like all these other, like establishments, just cleaning bathrooms. And then at night she would go to school to learn English. So then I didn't really see a lot of my mom.
Wow.
And then so my mom would always, and this is kind of the reason why I feel like I got into film, was my mom would always take me to the library, and then we would get a library card, and you can, I don't know if they still do this, but you can actually check out movies from the library. So you can get like those cassette, like, those old school, I
remember that.
movies. And then so she would get a whole bunch of movies for me to just kind of watch while she's gone. And so I grew up like watching all these movies, and that's, kind of how I learned English and stuff. So I ended up kind of like going in that direction, obviously film and all stuff wise. Maybe there's a correlation.
Such a cute story.
I know, right? Isn't it crazy? And then from there, my mom finally got a job as a preschool teacher. She's pretty much, in Florida. Right. And then so she was a preschool teacher. And she even to this day she still is a preschool teacher. But I remember in the beginning she had a couple jobs as a preschool teacher, and I remember she would take me to work with her. And just like seeing one day her going to work and her boss confronting her about how she doesn't have her papers, and then she just like left. She would just grab me. She's like, hey, we have to go. We can't, like, she can't work here. And I remember that like vividly as a kid, and feeling so like helpless. I'm like, I can't help my mom, And then eventually, fast forward, my mom ended up meeting my stepdad, and he's also from Colombia, but he's been in the United States a lot longer, and he's well established in a good job, and so he brought a lot of financial stability to our life. I didn't have a good relationship with him growing up, just because like I was very bitter about like having, because I had like abandonment issues, like because we would go through people's, like we live with this person and I'd get really connected to their kids and their family, and then we'd leave, and then we'd always do that. So when he was there, the relationship didn't really work, but it was because of me. It had nothing to do with him. He was a provider, took care of my mom. And of anything, I was just not a great kid by the time I was at that age. And then I kind of similar route. I ended up kind of like my parents were, so I don't know about you, but my parents were Catholic. Like my mom was Catholic, and then my stepdad was Catholic. And it's just, I feel like a Hispanic thing, like Catholic is like the default, you know what I'm saying? You just kind of grow up in it.
It's culture.
Yeah, exactly. And so I didn't, I went through the CCD school. I did all that. I got like my first communion and all that stuff. And I didn't have a great experience with like religion. And my parents were very forceful of it. Like, you have to go to church. And then they ended up converting to Christianity when I was like roughly like, I want to say like around like 8th grade.
Your mom and stepdad.
Yeah, they both ended up converting. But before that, like I was just like, for me, I was like, you guys are so bitter. My mom had anger issues. Like my mom was like, had really bad anger. It's crazy. I tell people all the time, because if you meet my mom now, like she's a super sweetest, like tiniest person. You would never ever like picture her doing these things. But she had a lot of these like issues that she would take out on me. And so the way I correlated was that, if you're Catholic, you're doing all these things, you're going to church, you're doing, you're standing, you're praying, and you're kneeling and all this stuff and taking communion. But then at home, you're this way, like this is not real.
Didn't add up.
Yeah. But then my parents converted to Christianity. And my mom had a really big switch. Like I can tell. But at that point, like I didn't really care, because I was like, the damage was already done. Like, and I just kind of went down this road of just being a bad kid. Like I got into drugs. I was like, never home, and kind of ended up in that route. And I just kind of like just didn't want anything to do with God. And then that ended up taking, that was a long season until I moved here. To be honest, was where I kind of like converted, not converted, but I found Jesus in the most authentic way. Because growing up, like I knew all the Bible scriptures, I knew all this stuff, but I didn't have like a real encounter, I'd feel like, until I was here, coincidentally, until my adult life. But that's something I want to talk about with you too. Tell me a little bit about your testimony about how you found God. I don't know did you grow up Catholic too, or was that like kind of like, was religion a thing in your household? Was it not? Like, what was your timeline with God, and how did you like decide to make that like, God's going to be my life kind of thing?
Yes, I want to answer that, but I want to ask you a question.
Yeah, for sure.
How old were you when your mom and your stepfather got together?
I was, I want to say like 7, like 6 or 7, one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, that's around the time. I mean, I was a little older, but when my parents got divorced, then my stepfather came into the picture. And I feel like around that time, you were super territorial.
For
as
sure,
a young boy
For sure,
with your mom.
100%.
So that probably had to do with the way that.
Yeah, 100%. Especially because it was me and my mom for like the longest.
Yeah.
And then so I was like, and then I would see people come and go all the time, like, you know, like whether it was like her friends or like guys that would like, I remember like guys would try to take my mom out on dates and stuff, and my mom would like wouldn't actually like care to do that. 'Cause she was so focused on like, you know, like building stability. But I would remember like people just coming and going all the time. So then when they got married, I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't really understand the essence of marriage really when I was at that age, but I was like, yeah, that's probably not gonna last. Like, you know, everybody just tends to leave. So then I never wanted to get like attached to. So that's probably another thing too.
That makes sense. Yeah. My family, we were Catholic by default. I want to say that. We only went to church like Christmas, Easter, those type of things. Yeah. I did my first communion, but that was it. So no, I didn't grow up really going to church like that. It wasn't up until I came to the U.S. and I think I got invited to like a youth camp.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Still. And I was like 14.
Was it like a Christian youth camp?
Yes, Christian youth camp. But this this is when I was getting in trouble.
Oh, okay.
So my girlfriend at the time invited me. And, you know, although I had bad intentions going into boot camp, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to just go to hang out with. Yeah. Did I say, youth camp? Although I had the wrong intentions going into youth camp, I think God flipped it, because I just wanted to spend time with my girlfriend at the time, right?
Yeah.
But that was the first time a seed was planted.
Yeah, that's usually how God does it. Yeah, he knows what he's doing. It's so funny. People usually tend to like go for their own selfish intentions sometimes, and then it just ends up, you know, God flips the script on them.
Yeah, he was strategic.
That's dope. So for you, so did you kind of like, what was your experience with that camp? Did you just kind of go and then leave like the same, but you know, down the line that seed kind of ended up growing, or was it like that you got transformed at that camp kind of thing?
Yeah, no, it was, I had an encounter with God, and I felt the Holy Spirit. Somebody prayed for me. It was a pastor, and he laid his hands on my stomach, and I felt like I was going down a roller coaster. Oh, wow. Keep in mind, I've never been prayed for. I've never been to church before. I've never.
I don't. What is this?
Yeah. So like, there was no way I could act this. This was something that I was feeling physically. Yeah. So I became really curious and wanting to So once I got back home, I wanted to find that feeling again. So then I got lost. I started like looking into Buddhism, started looking into like meditation, astral projection, you know, Egyptian gods, stuff of that nature. Yeah. And it was up until like 12 years later that I finally like re-encountered God.
How did that happen for you?
Which part?
The re-encounter, like, did you like, what was it that made it like, this is it, like, this Jesus is the way? Like, what was that moment for you?
I didn't have a Jesus moment. I had an encounter with the enemy.
Oh, interesting. So it was just the opposite.
Okay. It was the opposite. I had an encounter.
So what was that like?
So I was I had 2 encounters with the enemy, and I wasn't gonna stick around for the third. Yeah. So the first one, my friend hit me up. He's like, "Hey, bro, like, let's smoke. Like, I got some weed." And I was like, "Okay, I don't want to spend money on weed, so I'm gonna go get smoked out."
Yeah, for real.
I went over to my friend's vehicle where he was like, "Hey, come to my car. We'll smoke together." And he started telling me about how he, depending on the situation, depending on who he's speaking to, he taps into one of the 8 demons that rule his life. And I asked him, so which one am I talking to right now? And he started manifesting in front of me, started coughing, started telling me things about my life that brought disbelief to my future. So it was like the opposite of a prophecy, right? Yeah. So he started telling me things like, "Nah, bro, like, you know, that dream you have, that's never going to happen. You know, that thing that you've been thinking about or praying for, forget about that." Like, he was talking to me like this. So I ran out of the car. And I felt like something was attached to me, like on my left hand side on my back. So I called a friend that had been hitting me up for a year prior to that, inviting me to church.
There's always one of those, you know.
And I was like, I didn't want to go to church with him because his name's Lavelle. He's in his 40s, and he kept inviting me. I'm like, bro, I don't want to hang out with you. Like, we have nothing in common.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to hang out with you. Like, stop hitting me up. But in that moment, I'm like, he's the person I gotta call.
Yeah.
So I called him and I said, hey man, like, what do I have to do? I feel like there's something on me and I want to let go of it. So over the phone, I gave my life to Jesus for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And that next week, I went to church with him on Sunday. And I started going to church with him and my wife. And a couple months went by, I think like 2 months. And they were doing baptisms at the church. And he's like, he came over the night before the baptism day. He's like, hey, they're doing baptisms tomorrow. God is telling me it's your time.
Yeah.
Bring swimming shorts. So I ignored it. I'm like, I'm not going to get baptized. We go to church the next day, my wife and I feel this pull. God is telling me today's the day you'll be renewed. And I look at my wife and I told her, hey, I want to get baptized. She was like, right now? And I was literally wearing like Dickies and, buttoned up shirt. And she was like, yeah. And she was like, I'm going in with you. And I was like, let's do
That's
it.
dope.
So we both got baptized that
That's
day.
awesome, man. It's good to have a wife like that, man. Because like I've seen a lot of good men fall and fail because their wife either wasn't supportive or just is contradicting what God has for them. And then it just could be a bad downward spiral.
Yeah.
But that's good, man. That's awesome, dude. That's crazy. I love that, man. It's cool that, some people like tend to have, it's either one or the other. Like they have that experience with Jesus where they're like, wow, this is real. And then that does it for them. Or they have the complete opposite. Either way, it's real. But yeah, man, it's crazy that you bring up the whole aspect of having that like, demonic encounter. And that's very real, man. A lot of people like try to write it off and say it's whatever, but going back, you were saying how you kind of really got into like this like spiritualism, going into looking into like Buddhism and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I had a similar, experience.
Really?
What I ended up doing was I ended up, I had this background of like Catholicism and Christianity, and I knew that there was something out there. But like the way that I had it was, at least the way that from my experience was that I went to a very small church. It wasn't like anything crazy, and there wasn't a lot of people there who can answer my questions. I had a lot of questions. And it was more of a like, just, you got to believe it because we say so kind of thing. And I just wasn't about that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, I want like some, like give me some like logical reasoning here. And nobody can provide that. So then I was like, you know what? Well, I'm going to find it on my own. And, but I obviously first started with like, like taking apart Christianity, and then diving into other things. And then I started doing, LSD, shrooms. And then I got into Buddhism. I looked into almost every major religion, to see what it is. I would like consume Alan Watts like crazy. And he would just like have like, has a great voice, and he's obviously got a gift to speak, but he just kind of, his logic behind a lot of things is that, God is not really like real. And it's just like a inward, I guess like it's an outward projection of what's inside, and like how like we're our own gods and all this stuff, and how it's like ultimately what it boils down to is that you're your own god, and nothing really means anything. And it's just like then passed off as like, wow, that's super deep, you know what I'm saying? But it really isn't, And so I looked into all of it, bro. I was in it, and then fast forward, man, like it's so funny because I guess I'll tell you how I got saved. Was I was in the Marine Corps, and I was like working. I was a marksmanship instructor, so I taught people how to shoot.
Wow.
And I was one day cleaning some weapons with this one dude. His name was Plotnikov. He was some Russian dude. And bro, like I've been working with him for a while. Like it's been like a good minute. And dude, never the conversation of God was ever brought up. And so we were just, cleaning weapons, doing our thing, calibrating them and all that stuff. And then what he ended up, like, we were supposed to go to lunch, like, at some point in time, and he ended up asking me, hey, bro, like, do you know your Lord and Savior? He hit me with that question, And he was like... He
came in for the clothes.
For real, dude. And I was just like, man, like, you know, like keep in mind, bro, I come from like, bro, like I used to be at church every day, bro. Mondays, my parents were there for like a meeting. Tuesdays was like practice for something. Wednesdays was Wednesday service. Thursdays was like another meeting. Fridays was youth. Saturday was evangelism. And we would like get bread from like local grocery stores that was like a surplus of bread, and then go knock on doors.
Oh, we're
and be like,
in.
yeah, literally, bro. We were not going to be like, hey, you want some bread, or do you know your Lord and Jesus Christ? You know, like I've been there, done that. So I'm like, this man's trying to sell me on Jesus. You know, so I was like, immediately in my head, I'm like, no, like he's not gonna get the win. You know, he's not gonna sell me. So I was like, yeah. I mean, I told him like, yeah, I'm still looking around, like, you know,
still
like,
shopping.
Yeah,
around.
exactly. Like if I'm like going, like debating what college I'm gonna go to or something, right? And he was like, oh well, you know, like, you know, is there a certain reason why, like, you know, you don't like necessarily believe in Jesus? And I was like, well, I mean, you know, just a lot of questions, and I gave him all these questions that I had, and he couldn't answer them either. And he was like, honestly, man, I can't answer your questions. Like those are good questions, but they're pretty hard for me to answer. But all I can tell you is what Jesus did in my life.
That's testimony.
And then I was like, okay, and I was open to that. And then he gave me his testimony, and I was like, that's awesome, man. I love that. And then he was like, yeah, so you want to come to church with me? And I said, no. I was like, no, I'm good, thanks so. And then, dude, that ran for like a 2-hour conversation. Didn't even have lunch that day. And then I just shot him down, bro. But that's a seed was planted because I was driving home, and I was like, man, like that was so weird. You know what I mean? Like I thought that was so like bizarre because it was just so out of the blue. And so I was like, you know what, God, if you're real and you want me to go back to church, I made a deal with him.
Wow.
And so at the time I was freelancing. I was like just freelancing videography, photography, while I was in the Marine Corps part-time.
So how long you been doing video?
Since I was like 10.
Oh, wow.
So I've been doing it for a minute. Like right when YouTube came out, I was like, yeah, I had like this little,
old?
I had this little crappy camera from Walmart, bro. And I would make videos with my friends in the neighborhood, bro. Like it was, I mean, they're not great, but I've been doing it for a while. Like I love doing this kind of stuff.
So you're driving home?
Yeah. So I was driving home. And then, so at the time there was this company in LA. They were just brand new startup, and they're called Superfit, or Superhero Fitness is really what they're called. And then what it entails is just pretty much like they make workouts that are tailored to like superheroes, like a Bruce Wayne workout,
right.
You know, things like that.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, and then they evolved, and they were, at the time when I hit them up, they were evolving into a clothing brand where they make athletic like wear that's superhero, that looks like superhero clothes, but it's not with the cheesiness of like, you know, the logo of on the chest. It just has the cuts of like a super. They're really dope, man. I definitely recommend them. And now they're huge. They're a big brand now.
Plug.
Yeah, and they're doing really well. They ended up moving to Utah, their headquarters. But so I didn't know them at all, and I didn't know anything about them. I just been following for a minute, and I just, you know, hit them with a DM. I slid in their DMs like, hey man, like, love your guys' stuff. Because every time I would ask them questions about fitness, they would always answer it. And I was like, hey, been following you guys for a while. I would love to do a video shoot for you guys. If you guys ever want it, I'll do it for free. And they're like, yeah, man, we're in LA. Like, we can come down to San Diego like this weekend. On Saturdays at work. We're like, yeah, cool. Made that happen. So I was driving home, and then I was like, I told God, I'm like, I don't know this guy at all. If he brings you up in any shape or form, I will go back to church. Was like the deal that I made. And so fast forward to Saturday, we shoot all day. And then once we're done, I was like, hey, let me take this guy out for some sushi. Like, I want to pick his brain because he's doing something well. So him and his fiance at the time, now they're married, went out to eat. And then from there, I was just like, hey man, like, what do I need to do to get at your level? Like, you know, any like tips, entrepreneurship tips? And then he was just kind of like, yeah, man, like, you got some, because he came to my little apartment that I had like at the time. He was like, yeah, you got some good books on your shelf. Like, keep reading that. Like, you know, if you keep doing that, man, you know, you'll definitely go somewhere as long as you apply it. And then he's like, here's my Audible account. So he's like, you can have my Audible account so you can read all the books that I've read.
That's nice.
And then I was like, awesome, bro. I was like, and at the time I was like super like, at the time I was on my drive to become an entrepreneur. So I was like very like going to seminars, you know, like asking anybody who's successful, like, what's your top 3 books? You
How old were you at the time?
I was 19.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was 19. And then then he was like, yeah, man, I'll give you my top 3 books. I asked him. And he's like, yeah, I mean, like, the number 1 book I'm always going to recommend to everybody is the Bible. And then I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, man, dude. I was like, dude, the whole drive home, bro, because my wife was with me. and she has her own story, which is crazy, but she like grew up where her stepdad was an atheist and like told her like all this conspiracy theory stuff about like how religion is just created to like as a social construct to be able to control people and all stuff. And so she didn't have a good experience with God or church. And so I was like, how am I going to tell her? Like, I don't even know if she's going to believe me. So I just told her, hey, like, I feel like I just need to go back to church. And she was like, why? Like, why? Like, she was like, so not about it. And then, so I told her, hey, like, I actually went to this church once here, which is a church I attend to now.
What's the name?
It's called Awaken Church now.
Okay.
But they were C3 back then. And so I went there once or twice, and I was like, I love them, their messages, I love their culture. So I was like, I'll go back there. And then we ended up, I was like, I'd love for you to come with me, because she never came with me to that church, and she didn't want to go, but I forced her to go. And then first couple times, like she was like not having it, like she was having an attitude on her phone, and then I kind of realized that I was doing to her what my parents did to me, which they forced me. So I gave her the option to not come, and once I did that, like, she like softened her heart, and then she started coming, and then eventually she started loving it, and then she was like the one rushing me to hurry up so we wouldn't be late. And and then, but even then, man, like I was attending church, and I didn't really like, I wasn't living my life for God. Like I was just checking the box. It was just more of a feel good thing. But you know, Sunday would happen, and then Monday through Saturday was the same person. And then I ended up going to men's retreat that our church hosts every year. It's called Emerge. And it's honestly one of the best events. I've gone to a lot of events, and I still do go to obviously other events, but by far one of the best events that I've ever gone to. But at the time I was like, nah, I don't want to go. Like it sounds lame. Like I've been to church retreats. Like I grew up Christian. Like they're just lame. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like more like I thought it was going to be like some kumbaya, very like, very cringe kind of thing.
Right.
And, my buddy who was very persistent, he always hit me up like, hey bro, you coming? I was like, nah, dude, I don't want to. I told him I had to have money. He's like, bro, I'll buy your ticket. And I was like, well, I don't think they're going to let me go because I'm in the Marine Corps. He's like, just ask. And I did. And that was the first time they've ever let me do anything without taking leave. Like they're like, yeah, just go for it. And I was like, that's how I knew it was a God thing. And I still didn't want to go, but I gave my word. So I was like, I'm going to go, and this dude paid for my ticket, so I'm not going to be rude,
Right.
And then so I went with a closed heart. I never liked to worship. I thought that was weird. So I was just kind of sitting in the back during worship. But the first message that night that was preached just like pierced. I don't even remember what was preached, but I just remember it just pierced my heart, bro. I was crying, went to the front. And that's when I like really like gave my life. Because I like, when I went back to church, I thought I was good. I was like, yeah, I grew up as a Christian. You know what I'm saying? I'm just, picking up where I left off. Like I didn't really like do the whole like dedicate my life to God thing. I just thought I was just had attend church and I was good. But that's when I was like, man, I'm tired of the way I'm living. And then I started noticing a lot of correlations too, because I was on the hunt of becoming like, the better version of myself.
Right.
With all these books, I was reading all these, entrepreneurship books and stuff. I was starting to notice a lot of these correlations, are from the Bible. Like, like for example, like the law of attraction. That's a biblical principle. They just removed God from it and called the universe. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these things are biblical. And, they're just being ripped off and just, coined as something else. Yeah. So I started noticing that correlation. And then I realized, I need to put God in the center of my life, because everything that I'm doing is, God's on the sidelines, So I ended up, I got rocked that whole conference, man. And then I got baptized. I chose to get baptized because I've gotten baptized 3 times. First time, was without consent because I was Catholic. So they just, dunk you in that little pond that they got. And then the second time was more peer pressure from my mom. She's like, all the other kids are doing it, so you might as well do it.
Yeah, might as well jump in there.
And then the third time, I ended up actually like choosing that I wanted it.
Yeah.
And that was in 2018.
Wow.
And in March of 2018. And it's been my life has been crazy ever since in a good way.
Yeah.
And it's just been like, it's been the whole, I don't want to say it's the essence of where I am, without God, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have what I have. But it changed everything for me. And that's kind of how it was for me. It was more of a reconnection, kind of thing, but it was crazy, man. But I did learn a lot of stuff when I went down the route of like like looking into Egyptian stuff, like spiritualism, like
Right.
there's this new age thing going on. And honestly, man, like, I know a lot of people who are into like astrology and new age and they think they're very spiritual. And it's not that they're not spiritual, because they are tapping into a spiritual source, but it's not a good one. Even though
Talk about it.
some people think that they are. Like, and today, dude, there's so many people, bro, that I've realized here in California, like they say, yeah, like I'm a witch, but I'm a good witch. You know what I'm saying? Or like, yeah, like I practice this, but it's a good version of this. And it's like, like, although that's you, I believe that you believe that, but you're just being finessed. You know what I mean? You're being, Satan is the master of all lies. You know what I mean? So of course he would make you feel like you're doing a good thing, but yeah, man. And it's, new age is just Satanism, but modernized.
Yeah.
It's really what it is. Cause it's, you're idolizing yourself. And then you're using, you're tapping into all these spirits, you're idolizing these spirits. You're like using all these, crystals and things like that, a lot of people don't realize what doors are opening. And it's insane, bro. I can talk about that forever, but I definitely want to talk a little bit more about, now you going into you being saved, and now you started your clothing brand, correct?
Yes.
Right after that. So you got saved, what, 2 years ago, right? And then,
2 years ago.
And then when did you start your clothing brand?
About 4 months ago.
Okay. How did that happen?
Well, I had a clothing brand before I got saved.
Okay.
And it was tied into the law of attraction.
Oh, that's crazy.
It's called Vision Clothing. And my slogan was vision, passion, action.
Okay, that's dope.
Right.
Okay.
So then I started, a lot of the designs were inspired by hieroglyphics, Egyptian gods, the third eye. I became really popular because I was one of the first people to put the third eye like on a hat. So people got excited. They're like, oh my God, it's like you're wearing the third eye.
Forehead,
Yeah. So that's what became really popular. So once I got saved, God told me to stop making those designs. So I did. I actually ended up giving everything away, everything that I owned, all the clothing I had. I used to have like a booth, so I gave everything away.
Oh, wow.
Because God told me to do so. It wasn't until about a year and a half later, I started traveling all over the U.S. with an artist, Miles Minnick. I started managing him. And one of the flights back to California, I got an idea to make a hat, which was Pure Thoughts. And it was similar to the idea of like when you put on the hat, you have the third eye here. But God said, I'm going to make you do something that's going to glorify me. So I did the crown of thorns on the hat. So when you put it on, it's like you're being protected by the Holy Spirit. Your thoughts are being protected by the Holy Spirit. So that was the first design I made 4 months ago. And then it kind of just took off from there.
That's awesome, man. That's dope, dude. Tell me a little bit more how you kind of met Miles. Like, how did that, because you manage him. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I found out about Miles through TikTok. I watched the TikTok video. And it's right when Katie and my wife and I got saved. And we didn't even know there was like Christian hip hop like that. I've heard of Bizzle and Lecrae, but that's it.
Yeah.
So once we heard Miles, right when we got saved, we're like, what? We could still turn up to Christian music? We could still turn up and glorify God? Like, because he's from the Bay, so he makes like party music.
Yeah.
So we found him, and a couple months later went by. We're big fans. And my wife's like, oh my God, he's going to be in our area. We should go see his performance. So I was like, okay, let's do it. So we went. It was an event called West Fest. Shout out to Michael. He put it together. And I met Miles there, and I met another artist by the name of Jay Cash there as well. And we just connected. But I was so inspired by this event, West Fest, that I wanted to create my own. So I asked my pastor, hey, I have an idea. I want to do a show where we exhibit, we have hip hop dancers, obviously dancing to Christian hip hop. We have Christian artists. I had a professional beatboxer come out, a singer. And I was like, but I want to focus the event on vendors, and I want to bring out Christian clothing brands and just have the community support them. So he was like, yeah, let's do it. So obviously I booked Jay Cash. He's one of the people that I met at West Fest, and he was really good. But I had Miles close out the show. He was my headliner. So he came out. The event was at Light and Life in Long Beach. And he came. when Miles came, he came alone. I thought he was gonna come with like a whole team. I'm like, I thought he made it already. I thought he was famous, but he came alone. So when I saw that, I saw a void. He didn't have a team, and when he was performing, his booth was left alone, so he wasn't selling no merchandise. So I was like, hey, whenever you come back to LA, you're in this area, let me know. I'll sell your clothes for you. That's my background. I'm a sales rep.
Yeah.
I've been in retail, so I understand the market. So I'll do it for free. I love your music. I'll get an opportunity to go into your shows for free, and I'll sell your clothes.
Yeah.
So we did like 2 or 3 shows. On the third show, I was just networking, just talking to people. And I ended up speaking to a rep that was putting together an event at the Angel Stadium in Orange County. And they needed a performer. So I was like, hey, I got the right person for you.
Yeah.
So I actually booked Miles's first stadium performance.
That's dope.
So when he saw that, he was like, man, you got to come on the road with me.
That's dope, man.
So that's how that relationship was birthed.
That's crazy, man. That's dope, man. It's crazy how having, posturing yourself from a service position of, hey, I'm here to serve you. How far that can take you. I mean, that's one thing too that I've noticed with, bro. I mean, God's, I've been blessed to be put in rooms with a lot of high level entrepreneurs, to get paid to go on trips like DR and all these things, like just to be with like all these high level entrepreneurs and do content for them.
Yeah.
But honestly, man, like what opened those doors was me always posturing myself like, hey, I'm here to serve you.
Yeah.
This is the skill set that I have. I'll do it for you because I believe in whatever. And then, that always, I feel like God always definitely blesses that for sure.
Yeah. In the world, people think that the only way to get to the top is by, beating everyone up till you get up there. But you can serve your way to the top. That's something that I've learned recently.
Yeah.
You can serve your way to the top.
100%, man. And it definitely, and that's honestly, bro, like one thing too, I mean, that's a biblical principle. We're here to serve. Jesus, is God, and he came to earth and all he did was serve, which is crazy to think, right? So if it's good enough for God, it's definitely good enough for us.
Yeah.
And so, that principle alone, if you just follow that, Jesus was a God and he came here to serve. Man, if we do the same thing, if we come and serve people, whether they believe in God or not, like as Christians, we'll always be distinguished and different because we carry that principle.
Yeah.
That's why I've noticed a lot of people who are Christians and even in the entrepreneur space or similar to that, they always tend to stick out because they have that different posture. Versus a lot of people are more, normally like self-centered in the sense of like, oh, I have to like cut these corners. I got to like make this person look bad so I can be, put in the limelight for a promotion or whatever. And that tends to be like a toxic, type of way of building your way to the top that I feel like the world kind of like idolizes. But yeah, man, it's crazy to think, how, I mean, you've been, I was your 27 or you said 26, right?
26, yeah.
So you're 26.
27. I'm about to be 27 in a couple months.
When's your birthday?
4th of July.
Oh, what a great birthday, You have fireworks just for your birthday, man. That's pretty cool, man. But yeah, no, I think that it's crazy to think, man, you've been, obviously here in the United States for like what, 17 or 16 years?
What about?
And then you kind of had this whole experience, like you said earlier, that if your parents didn't make that sacrifice to come here, you wouldn't have had the experience you had in the way that it happened. And God intended that from the get-go, although like there's times and moments in our lives where we may feel like this sucks or things aren't going our way. But usually a lot of times, God has a plan for it and he can turn anything that's bad into good. And use it to glorify him. But it's really cool to see. That's kind of how it played out in your life, like as a trend, like you moving here, thought it was terrible. You got bullied. And then from there you went into, going into like bad things, like doing drugs, hanging around the wrong people. And from there, like, God like planted a seed, then transformed you through an event. And it's just like, then you got connected with this one person. Wow. And then you started your clothing brand. And I love to like see like, how that progression happens. Cause God has done the same thing. And I think God is like he's like the ultimate creator. He's such a genius in the way he kind of like weaves and puts things together and people together. So thanks for sharing that, man. I love that, man.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Earlier we were talking about the brand and you thought the brand was already established. What made you have that perception of the brand?
I'd say, so the reason why was because I think, honestly, bro, I think I stumbled upon your brand through an ad that then I clicked on that ad, like on your page. And then I was like, oh, because I saw it, I was like, this is fire. I'm like, let me follow these guys. I click on it and I followed you guys. And then I saw Miles on there. And I know Miles is, blown up on TikTok and stuff. So my perception was like, oh, like he's, well-known, like Christian artist. You're a Christian brand. You guys probably partnered up or something like that, to do like a collab or something like that. So that was my perception of that.
And then you ended up buying something. So
yeah,
what was that? What was that process like as a customer? Because I want to give people that have clothing brands like some nuggets today.
Yeah, I'd say like, so from start to finish, I saw the brand. And then for me, bro, like I love to, like, I mean, I kind of even told you before, dude, like that one brand that was, that's established now, which is like the superhero fitness brand. Like I love to find brands that are like, doing well, that are established. They're not necessarily like, on like the level of like fear of God, like doing like crazy good.
You like up and coming brands.
Exactly. Yeah.
Undiscovered.
Exactly. Yeah. So I saw that within your brand. So I was like, and then obviously the stuff's dope. So I mean, if it wasn't dope, I wouldn't have bought anything, to be honest. So I mean, pretty much when I went on your page, I got that ad, and then I went from that ad to then looking at your social media page. I hit you up, on DM. I just kind of like said, hey, bro, like I'm here to support however I can.
Yeah.
And I know like also too, I know a lot of people do that, may do that, where they're like, hey, I'm here to support you. And it's like, bro, just buy a hat if you want to support me. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's why, like, because sometimes people do
Somebody
that.
had to say it.
I feel like some people are just like, hey, bro, I'm here to support you. And it's like, okay, thanks, buy a hat, or buy something, So I always tell, and I was telling my wife, I'm like, hey, I hit these guys up. And I said, hey, I'm here to support. And I was like, and I always think of that when people say that, where they're like, hey, I'm here to support you, but they don't want to buy from you or like share your stuff.
Right.
So I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. So that's why I shared your stuff and also bought from you.
Yeah, you bought it and then you followed up with content and tagging me.
Yeah, exactly.
That was next level.
Thanks,
client satisfaction.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I mean, you made it easy, and then it's obviously even easier purchase decision when it actually looks really good. But also ultimately to the fact that you responded to my message, and then you were very on top of like, hey, like, did you get your hat yet? Did you do this? Like, you took the time to find out where I'm from, see if like, oh, like you're in San Diego, like, oh, we have the San Diego hat, things like that. That really gave it a good experience. So like if you can kind of touch on it a little bit on like maybe some tips or some like something that maybe some things you wish you would have known, things that you would have applied or that are working well for anybody who has a clothing brand or thinking of starting a clothing brand.
Yeah, I think that's important. When I reach out to brands, I'm usually not expecting a response, but when they do, man, I feel special. Yeah, I'm like, damn, they're taking the time of their day to respond to me, the customer. And I really just try to focus on, especially as a Christian brand, like, how can I make this dope? Like, how can I make someone that's not a believer buy it regardless, because they can't ignore that it's that fresh. Fire. Yeah. So I try to focus on those things. So content, I mean, you understand this. Perception is everything. So I pay a lot of attention to my photo shoots, to the content that I'm putting out. I spent hours just perfecting that because I know that's what people are going to see, and that's going to be a deciding factor whether they're going to buy or not. Yeah.
100%, man. And it's really that attention to detail too, man. I like that you said too that you're not like, and this is where I feel like a lot of Christian brands may go wrong, is where they're so, I mean, and I get the aspect of they're so tailored into, I mean, the Christian community is pretty big. Right. You can make Christian tailored stuff and focus on Christians and do well in business. But I like that you are kind of like, hey, I want to also make it appealing to people who may not be Christian, because that's kind of what we're called to do as Christians. So it's like you're kind of like going outside of that comfort zone to even do that too. And I get it too, man. I mean, like I told you, man, I'm into fashion. Like that's one of my like I guess hobbies, you could say.
I could tell.
Thanks, man. And I actually wanted to start a clothing brand so I started a clothing brand when I was in high school. Didn't do well, obviously, because like I didn't know what I was doing. Then I wanted to start a clothing brand a couple of years ago, but I just didn't feel like I was. So we put a trademark in for a name, got shut down. A lot of things went wrong within that aspect of it, like legally. And then so I was like, I still feel that call to do that, but I felt like it was wrong timing. And then, thank God that happened, because then it ended up reverting me to this avenue of this creative side of my life.
There's like you in your pocket, I feel like.
Yeah. And then so I ended up kind of like just going into this aspect. But then, I mean, in my grander scheme of things, my grander goal is if I establish this well, whenever I do start a clothing
It's
brand,
inevitable.
yeah, and then I can use my own branding agency to then brand my own stuff. But then also it connects me with other people like you, wherever if I do cross that bridge, I can like always hit you up and ask those questions. Hey, what will like manufacturers, things like that, set me up for success to be able to then do that well. But yeah, man, it like positioned me correctly. But I know when I was going through it, I was like, man, what do I do? Like, how do I? Because I can ask a lot of questions that maybe some people who are doing it were kind of like maybe hitting some roadblocks. But what was it for you that made you like? How did you establish your brand? Like, this is what we're gonna do, and then how did you go about like making that first step to get started? Because I feel like a lot of, especially creatives, get stuck in that like that perfectionism of like I want to do it, maybe make a couple designs, but then I'll execute. Like, what was it where you took the idea? What was the idea? Then how did you like put rubber to the road?
Yeah, I think it was first understanding that as a Christian, whatever I make, I gotta make it with the intention of knowing that this product is an evangelistic tool. It's an opportunity for me to share the gospel, whether I'm wearing it or a believer is wearing it. It's an open door. Yeah. It's reverse evangelism. If you see this hat, you're gonna ask about it, and then I'm gonna tell you my 3-hour testimony and, and get you baptized the next day.
Yeah, plant that seed, bro.
No, just kidding. But I did it with that intention, and obviously, being freshly saved, I had a lot of impact or a lot of influence by streetwear that is popular in the secular world, right? Talk about Stussy, talk about Supreme, Babe, those type of brands that I'm really inspired by.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make it still relevant to culture, but have a strong message behind it. And what was the second question that you asked?
How did you then like
start?
Yeah, start that. What was your like action steps like? What
Yeah.
did that look like?
I think like you mentioned, like the first thing that I think about, and I think 95% of people think about this, is like I need to get the name, trademark, all the legalities in order.
Yeah.
If you're starting a brand, I would say, skip that step and first prove the concept before you start investing hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Have a proof of concept. So what I did is I started with a dozen hats. Okay. It doesn't take thousands of dollars to start a clothing brand. You could start with a couple $100. Okay. Right? Whether it's a dozen shirts or a dozen hats, a dozen beanies, whatever it is, start with 1 dozen. And if you can sell that dozen, flip it and make 2 dozen and then make 4 dozen and sell it. So go to booths or sell to family and friends. Right off the bat, I knew that the hats were going to do well just because people complimented the product a lot. So right off the bat, before I even got LLC or anything, I started the website. So I just went on Shopify. They had a deal where I think it was 1 cent a month. So I invested 3 cents into my Shopify store and started selling. So once I started selling, then I started working backwards a little bit, just getting the name in order. Yeah. I didn't have a name before I started selling the hats. I started selling the Pure Thoughts hats before I had Christ-like
that's good to know
as a name.
Yeah.
I feel like people get stuck on that. And
I agree,
if you could just prove that you can sell, it's a dope product, they'll speak for itself.
Yeah. That's good, man. I feel like a lot of people do get caught up in that. And I like how you said that you just kind of, hey, just test it out, see if it does well. Because, you got to prove to yourself that you can. Because, you could do the whole thing, invest so much money into it, and then do it and then realize maybe the product's not good or you just don't even like it. You know what I mean? So I think that's good, man. I think it's just kind of like get your feet wet, get in there. And that's a good practicality. What would you say would be some good, like, must-do things for people who have brands? Like, should they be going to, like, these events that they can set up tents? Like, should they be, like, marketing? Should they be putting money into, put content? Should they be like partnering up with artists? Should they be, what are the like top, if you had to do top 3 things that they need to do action step wise to get their brand out there, what would you say?
So first, perfect the product. Make sure that is something that people actually desire, something that people want, something that people gravitate towards. So perfect the product. Once that's perfected, I would start focusing on social media, start a Instagram page, start sharing. So I would start focusing on your content, because a lot of people start getting, they start posting stuff, but it's like their little brother wearing it or a selfie of them. Try to pay attention to what you're posting. And if you're bad at media, hire someone, pay someone. I'd rather you invest $100 to pay a photographer than you missing out on business opportunities because you wanted to take, the photos on your Samsung.
Yeah, that's even worse.
So product, media, and once you kind of establish those two things, what helped me out a lot is I give my product strategically to people I know would wear them and promote it, which would be influencer marketing, but I didn't even give my stuff to influencers. I gave it to people that were just active and that were in the space that I'm in.
Yeah. Right.
That's smart. So I don't care if you have, 1,000 followers. If I know that you're active and you're promoting, like I want to bless you, because I know that it's going to give my brand more exposure.
Yeah, that's good. Because I feel like a lot of people do think like, oh man, I got to pay like this one influencer, like, like $1,000 just to wear this whatever on social media. And I think that's another good thing too to harp on. Because even in my industry too, like you want to like focus on, not necessarily always going for people who may have like, that width. So that big follower, that they're like, you got 50K, whatever, but you want to mainly focus on like that depth. Like how deep is their, their follower? Like you can have 100 followers, man, but if 90% of them are commenting on your stuff, if you say you're gonna buy this thing and you're gonna go here and they all do it, that's more depth than the person who has like 50K and nobody engages. That
I mean? Gets me excited.
So yeah,
don't go wide, go deep.
100%, man. 100%.
Right, because people don't understand that. They don't understand the power of having a niche. Right. And for the longest, I was always like, well, I don't know my niche. Like I want to make an inspirational clothing brand that skaters could wear or hip hop artists. But no, I understood that my niche was Christian hip hop. And once I understood that niche, then I went deep. Yeah. I went deep. Right. And I had the privilege of working with Miles. So he was one of the first big artists to rock it. But then people started seeing him rock it. And then all the other Christian artists started rocking it, and then all their fans started rocking it.
Yep, that's how it works, man.
So
and that's crazy, man. Because like again, bro, a lot of people get caught up on like the numbers, but in reality, like you want to partner with people who are, just have that like that local authority, bro. Like is what I call it. Is just like you may have like again 50 people, 10 people, whatever. But if you say jump and they're jumping, that's 10 people that you got versus that like that fake like influencer, renting a Lambo kind of influence. That's not real,
So my first month, I sold 100 hats. It's not crazy, but it was good for a new business.
Yeah.
And out of the 100 hats, this is what tripped me out. I went to an event at the Honda Center in LA, and there was 15,000 people. And I had only sold 100 hats. And 2 people out of the 15,000 people were wearing my hat.
Oh, wow.
That's how crazy. I knew I was going deep.
That's true.
Does that make sense?
100%, man. Because that's pretty crazy. Yeah, because 100 isn't a lot. Like if you think about it from a grand scale. Like,
but the fact that
they were there, and that's kind of cool too. Because I've heard like certain artists too that are whether they're artists and become clothing. They create a clothing brand where they get a certain type of feeling when they go out and they see somebody wearing their brand that they don't know, or like that has nothing to do with their direct network.
Yeah.
What was that like? How did that feel?
Man, it was a blessing, because when I made eye contact with the guy wearing my hat, he recognized me.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yo, like, I'm famous. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was a great feeling. But knowing that he talked to me, he was like, man, like, people love this hat. And it goes back to the conversation I was talking about earlier. He's like, this guy approached me asking me about the hat, and I shared my testimony with him.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, dude, that's crazy. He's like, yeah, I drove here to... I drove from LA. No, I drove from Arizona to LA to be at the show. And the fact that, I'm meeting you, it's a blessing. So it was, it was a blessing for both ends, obviously. But it was the best feeling, man. Being 1 month in and being at this event.
That's cool, dude.
That's where I knew I was in the right market, and I knew God was behind it.
That's awesome, dude. Man, dude, thank you for sharing that, bro. I would definitely want people to know where they can find you. website, social media, whatever. So if you want, you can go ahead and look at that camera and just tell them, what's the best place they can find you, reach you at, buy your products. Cause I do recommend your products for sure, bro. Like I got my hat.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be pumping it out to my audience, but yeah, man, just tell them where they can find you, and hopefully, somebody buys your hat and then gets that revelation, dude. Or maybe someone from this podcast may be watching it and then actually like waiting for that confirmation to start a brand. So you never know.
I love that. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Mr. Vision himself. It's mr.vision himself. And you can find my clothing brand at Christ-like Collection. And I'm very responsive. Every time I get dozen messages, I get my goal is to get through them throughout the day. Like, I don't like to see the red bubble with numbers. I like to clear everything out. So if you want to reach out, if you need advice, if you want to just connect, you can DM me.
Awesome, man, dude. Thanks again, bro. Really appreciate you being on the show.